Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the Editorial Director with Data Science Central and also Chief Data Scientist for Data Magnum. So I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Alteryx for sponsoring today's event. Alteryx is a longtime supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. Now, past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com, and if you haven't had the opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. Now, today's webinar is entitled Revolutionize Your Data Analysis, and that's going to be presented by Alteryx. But before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format for today's webinar. Today's event will be an hour long. We have 4 presenters who I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A following the presentation, and this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. Now, I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation because we'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. Well, I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Reggie Wilkerson with the State Department Federal Credit Union, Phil Hetzel with Slalom Consulting, Michael Sullivan with Alteryx, and Raman Kaler, also with Alteryx. Now, Reggie is Director, Enterprise Management at State Department Federal Credit Union, and an analytics leader with experience in all aspects of information management. He's adept at managing programs focused on analytics, data visualization, business intelligence, data integration, and process automation. Now, Phil is a consultant at Slalom Consulting and is an end-to-end data analytics consultant with experience in data modeling, extract, transform, load, data warehousing, data visualization, and advanced analytics. Now, Michael is a solutions engineer at Alteryx. Now, prior to joining Alteryx, Michael had worked in the telecom space as a Tableau consultant, where he came across Alteryx and realized the potential it could have in the industry. Raman is Senior Manager, Alliance Marketing at Alteryx, where she focuses on defining strategy and executing programs for joint marketing efforts with key strategic partners. She currently focuses on partner marketing efforts with Tableau, Amazon Web Services, and Salesforce, amongst others. So thank you all for being with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. With a combination of Alteryx, Tableau, and Amazon Web Services, the State Department Federal Credit Union revolutionized the way they perform analysis and deliver valuable insights to the business. So in today's webinar, you'll learn how they used leading enterprise analytic technologies to abolish manual processes ripe for human error and replace them with repeatable automated processes. Drive impactful insights quickly with flexible, secure, and always current cloud data storage instead of the legacy on-premises options, and save money by removing and replacing outdated systems that didn't work and that no one used with a tech stack that worked seamlessly together for stakeholders. So Reggie, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can take it away as soon as you're ready to go.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bill. I really appreciate that. So again, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone out there. Again, I'm Reggie Wilkerson. I'm the Director of Enterprise Data Management with the State Department Federal Credit Union. And today we're going to go through our story and how we revolutionized our data analysis. So as Bill has already stated, we're going to go through our story in more detail and then go through, why Alteryx? Why did we choose this data integration, this data prep tool? We're going to go through a live demo. And then at the very end, as Bill stated, we'll go through a Q&A. So really, to begin, what we embarked upon last year when I joined the company was to embark on a digital transformation. And when you think about it, the ultimate goal for us was to bridge silos, and we wanted to put ourselves in a position to be able to leverage new technologies such as AI and machine learning. But we really had to take a step back and start from scratch and ensure that we had the right infrastructure and tools in place. So one of the things that we looked at was we needed to start to bridge those silos. So those silos in systems and silos in departments. And one of the ways we did that, leveraging technology, was by leveraging APIs. And those APIs allowed us to connect to our various business systems. And then from there, we started working with all of the different teams around the company. And we went through that process of aligning the people, the process, and all our technology assets. And really, the overall goals, if you look at it, for us are to drive efficiency. We want to minimize rework. And also, we want to increase our speed to market of our products and services. We want to reduce our overall costs from an operational standpoint. And really the biggest thing, and I think what everyone goes through when they go through a digital transformation, is you want to enable innovation within your organization. So really, looking at this slide, data is at the heart of that. That is the glue in between everything that we do is making sure that we have accessible, cleansed data. Also, cloud infrastructure allowed us to really ramp up and go to market much quicker, with our speed to market, and then automating a lot of the processes that we had in place that are very manual, and they were just ripe for automation because of the amount of resources that it took to get many common tasks done, and then just the manual errors that happen with human intervention. So when I initially started, well, one of the things that I took a look at was that current environment, and I completed an assessment. And during that assessment, I saw that there were a few clear opportunities for improvement pertaining to how we leverage, maintain, and stored our data assets. And what I saw, I kind of characterized it around two buckets: limited accessibility and limited functionality. From the accessibility standpoint, we had data that was in silos, as I've spoken about, and we also didn't have a lot of resources that had the technical skills. And so we didn't have the tools in place where our business analysts could really go in and produce their own reports and be more self-sufficient, having self-service tools. A lot of the reports that went to management, they had errors because the process, sometimes we saw when we started documenting everything, it might be a 10-step process to get a few board reports out to our leadership. And then there were errors that would happen along the way because many different people had their hands in the spreadsheets, and just manual errors occurred. And then functionality. A lot of the reporting techniques were outdated and manual. There was a lack of interdependency amongst the teams. Again, back to that silo theme that you've seen. And then a lot of the reports were just PDF and just Excel. So, a user or leader couldn't ask the next question, right? What's the next logical question after you have one of your questions answered? It would take another 2 to 3 weeks. The report build turnaround time was quite long and lengthy. And then another thing that I saw was around data governance. So we didn't have consistent definitions around our key metrics. And for instance, what is a member? How many members do we currently have? So if I went around the organization and asked 4 people, I would get 4 different answers. And of course, that bled into all of our reports being misaligned, which is a huge issue. And so the impact that we made was bringing in the tools that we're talking about, the technology stack today, of AWS for storage, AWS Redshift, the data warehouse in the cloud. Obviously, Alteryx has been a huge help, having that data prep, data integration tool, along with the data enrichment package, and then ultimately leads into Tableau, building out dashboards and reports that provided insights that were self-service in nature, that allowed our analysts, our leadership, to ask the next question, and it can easily get answered. And so what we did was we designed data marts broken out by subject areas. We went around, we figured out all the various source systems and all those processes aligned with those source systems. And then from there, we started to design our data marts. Okay. So really what we have now is this new platform, and what we've seen happen is that operational friction that I've spoken about has reduced greatly. Now, our team members have clean, accurate, and most importantly, easily accessible data that they can leverage. it's being leveraged for decision making at the highest levels of our organizations. So now when we have meetings, a lot of times dashboards and reports drive the meeting from Tableau using this new platform. And, it's driven decision making on should we buy this branch, should we close another branch, should we add new ATMs around the country in certain spots. So now, in order to make those decisions, we're leveraging data. So that's been great to see. And at all levels, if you look at the top, right, the consumers at all levels of the organization. So now our team members, right, when they're producing their operational reports, all of that has been automated. The supervisors and managers, they get those reports and they can summarize it to gain insights at their levels. And of course, our executives now have clean, accessible data that they're able to leverage. So one of the things that we looked at initially was a lot of our legacy on-premise infrastructure was getting close to end of life. And I wanted to ensure that we were leveraging infrastructure that could scale with us, allow us to grow, that was flexible, no matter which operating system that we wanted to leverage for whatever system or tool that we wanted to utilize. Using AWS has really enabled us to really get up to speed rather quickly. We had a lot of quick wins early on, and I have to say that using AWS in this architecture that you see right here, the solution architecture, really enabled that. And so now our network engineering team, they have more time to focus on other more value-add activities. They no longer have to worry about the next patch, the next release. A lot of that stuff has been automated. And then AWS has wonderful tools where you can go in and see what's happening with the network. You can get a bird's eye view of what's going on, and also from a security standpoint. We know everything is secure, is out there in plain sight to see for our network engineering team, so they know if there's any intrusion that is trying to happen, we have the tools in place to help with that. And so now one of the biggest decision points that I had when we started was which ETL or data integration tool are we going to leverage. And so when I had heard about Alteryx and during my consulting background, and once I started meeting with the team, I saw that first of all, it's very user friendly. You can rapidly get up to speed with the tool from a learning curve standpoint. But it also had data enrichment data sets that you see here, such as TomTom, Experian, and the U.S. Census Bureau. And so that was a huge selling point for us. So now, instead of relying on vendors to conduct analysis for us, we're able to build this stuff in-house. And it's been a huge help, and that's driven down cost, and that's also really shortened the time it takes us to get a data-driven marketing campaign done. It used to take 3 to 4 weeks prior. Now, literally in 3 to 4 days, we can get a marketing campaign done. And that's with a few iterations, right? You definitely want that back and forth and meet with the business, meet with the marketing team to ensure that we've helped answer that question or if we need to enhance it anymore. So this has been excellent. We've really gotten a lot of value with this data enrichment package and just Alteryx in general. And so here's some of those sample business questions that are available now with Alteryx. And so now we can see within the DC area how far away on average do customers live from a branch or an ATM. How large is our combined trade area? How many members don't own homes and have children, right? So they'd be right to that first mortgage, right, to market that to them. Is the member likely to respond to mail? What types of businesses are located near our branches? That's pretty important being a credit union because we are driven by organizations, right? That's our biggest segment of members. And so when we are able to do that analysis on companies that are currently in place by our branches or coming in place, if they're building, we have that analysis now. We have that data set now in order to do that analysis and ensure that we're reaching out to the right people to ensure we keep growing. And so again, as I've touched upon before, the marketing team saw a real big value with that Mosaic data set, and that's through Experian. And so, for instance, one of the first marketing campaigns that we did was we wanted to target our existing homeowners several years into their mortgages with home equity HELOC offers. You know, we feel like we have excellent rates, and so this has been one of the most successful campaigns that we've had. And it's all because of the Alteryx datasets, the platform that we built with AWS, Alteryx, and Tableau, and the team. The team has gotten up to speed rather quickly over the last year, and now we're able to really leverage our datasets. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Phil, and Phil with Slalom Consulting is going to go into a little deeper discussion around some of the artifacts that were built over the past year.
Thanks, Reggie. Thanks for that introduction. So, again, everyone, my name is Phil Hetzel from Slalom Consulting. For those of you who don't know, Slalom is a both management and technology consulting firm present in pretty much every major United States city, as well as offices in Canada and the UK. And just as Reggie mentioned, what I wanted to give insight upon is kind of the specific business value that this new stack has given to SDFCU over the past year or so. And with that, you know, to start things off, I want to talk about some of the top accomplishments and, you know, firsts that SDFCU has accomplished with this new cloud architecture. Number one, enterprise ETL with Alteryx. This is actually an interesting one because, you know, Alteryx is not typically thought of as an enterprise ETL tool. It's typically thought of as, you know, an excellent data prep, advanced analytics, and spatial analytics tool. However, we were able to use Alteryx and Alteryx Server to make a, you know, fully loaded enterprise ETL product with very strong performance and to basically complete the data warehouse in the cloud. Number two, first conform member table. Reggie touched on this a little bit, but for those of you familiar with data warehousing, you recognize how important it is to have a conformed member or a conformed customer table. Basically what that allows you to do is it allows you to share a master member list or master customer list throughout your entire organization without having different definitions for that very important term. Number three, first geographic dashboards. Before this technology stack, it wasn't really possible for SDFCU to get a geographic view of their data. So in other words, they never really have seen their members pointed on a map type of visualization, let alone any type of advanced spatial analytics that goes along with that. Number four, Reggie touched on this a little bit, but you know, first time that there was an in-house market segmentation done, and I'm going to go into detail on that a little bit later. And number five, first use of cloud computing. This was a big change for SDFCU, being a financial institution, especially with kind of all the things happening in the news with data breaches and everything. But by partnering with SDFCU and Slalom and also AWS, we're able to move some segments of their business to the cloud, which makes for a lot more iterative development for any type of proof of concept that they want to develop. So a little bit about why we chose this stack in the first place. I'm not going to go into too much detail about AWS and Tableau. I would say AWS and Tableau are the first names in kind of what they do, right? So AWS is certainly the market leader for cloud computing. It has, intelligence-grade security credentials. It's extremely scalable if you program it correctly. It's an operating expense, not a capital expenditure, so it allows for a lot of proof of concept focused development. And it limits the risk basically of wanting to try something new. If you want to try something new on AWS, you can spin it up, and if it doesn't work, you can spin it right back down for minimal cost. And also the growing ecosystem of AWS products. It seems like they have a new product every single day. And for Tableau, obviously, they have an extremely high rate of innovation, and I think it's tough to avoid having seen a Tableau dashboard. They're everywhere at this point. Alteryx is probably the most interesting one on this list. So, as I mentioned before, Alteryx is typically thought of as a data prep, advanced analytics, and spatial analytics tool. However, we thought a little bit bigger than that. So we figured that Alteryx, we can use those self-service capabilities after the data warehouse is built. But why would we get a completely separate software product just to complete the data warehouse, just to complete the ETL to append the data warehouse? So by using that approach, we basically got the best of both worlds. We programmed an ETL enterprise ETL tool to create the data warehouse, and we got the best of Alteryx, which allows us to now pull data for micro targeting, and perform a lot of spatial analytics based on the tool. One point that I also want to mention about Alteryx is their server component, Alteryx Gallery, also allows for process automation. So you can think about it this way: if you're assigned a report to run or a SQL query to run, every month for your supervisor, that's something that you could make a workflow for in Alteryx, throw it up on Alteryx Gallery, and then it allows for a self-service component where anyone who's curious can run that workflow anytime they want. So that's a little bit about why we chose that specific stack. And now I want to quickly go into two examples about how we delivered value with this new stack. First one being market segmentation and targeting, which we've talked about briefly. So, how was this done before at SDFCU? This was done by basically the marketing department coming up with some type of campaign. And, they would have to gather a lot of disparate data based on their customers and deliver that data to another vendor and, with their requirements. So given those requirements, which could be something like, we want to send an email to current homeowners, that make, a certain amount of dollars every year to try to market a refi to them, let's say. That's an iteration that would probably take 3 to 4 weeks, the back and forth of going, trying to send those requirements to the vendor and getting something back. So you can imagine how dependent SDFCU was on that process. It also doesn't allow for a great deal of customization. There's not a lot of creativity that can be performed if the vendor is kind of doing all of the number crunching and all the slicing and dicing on their end. And also, obviously, it limits the amount of iterations that can be done with that 3 or 4 week timeline. Campaigns are typically something that need to be sent out, kind of within the month, and they typically are time sensitive. So, the bottom line here at the bottom of the slide, you can see before the current technology stack, marketing campaigns couldn't be self-reliant. So how do we fix that? So with this new technology stack now, the process are these 3 steps that lead into an iteration, right? So the marketing department can refine their campaign. So basically, they can send questions to Reggie's team, and then Reggie's team, based on those questions, can blend and enhance the data. So what I mean by that is they can pull data out of this Amazon Redshift data warehouse, and they can plug that into an Alteryx workflow where they can combine Alteryx's datasets with this conformed data. So, in this case, if I'm thinking of the example that we did, we basically looked at members that did not currently have mortgages with SDFCU, but using census data and using Experian data, we could view which people were likely to be homeowners with mortgages at other places. And not only that, we could view how long they have been in that specific residence. So once that list was collated by Reggie's team, it's then delivered to the marketing department, who then can refine it further, right? So now instead of doing that process over 3 to 4 weeks and paying a vendor to do it, that process can now be done in-house with a great more deal of creativity. So that's one example of how Alteryx and Redshift specifically were used to create business value for SDFCU. A second example. So not too long ago, the C-suite came to Reggie and asked what should have been probably a simple question. So which of our members live in underserved communities? It's actually a very complicated question because the definition of an underserved community has a lot of spatial analytic components to it. So just naming off a few, an underserved area is one that is 80% of the metropolitan area's median family income. It's an area that has 1.5 times the national unemployment rate. It's an area in which 20% of people live in poverty. And it's done at what's called the census block group level. So you can think of a census block group as almost like a neighborhood in a city. That small of an area. So how would they have done this before the stack? Quite simply, they would not have been able to do it because of the many spatial components involved in this analysis, and the fact that they didn't necessarily have a conformed member or customer dimension to base their data on. So what was done with the new stack? We were able to collect that SDFCU data in the first step, and out of Amazon Redshift, and basically pulling out the members that were current members. And in the second step, gather internal and external data, we're able to again use that census data to view at a metropolitan statistical area level, what is the median income for that, and then compare that to the median income of the block group level, amongst other things, right? So using the census data to compute those metrics that I talked about earlier in terms of unemployment rate and percent of people that were living in poverty. So after we calculate which geographic areas were actually classified as underserved, then we need to somehow match that data with their members to see which members live inside of those areas. So using a tool like Alteryx, we're able to do that actually very easily by doing like a spatial join or a spatial match by basically looking at the polygons that the underserved areas represent and then viewing which members sit inside those polygons. And the end result of that, on the next slide, it ends up in this dashboard. So this dashboard is in Tableau. So through this example, we've taken you through all three components of this new architecture. But this simply wouldn't have been possible with a stack before, right? So in this chart, there's a lot of things going on, but basically you're able to see in those red components, which could be as small as a city block, you're seeing what they would classify as an underserved area. And then with the the blue points, you're seeing which members don't live in one of those underserved areas. And then the red points, which you can see kind of in the northeast of the United States, those are members that do live in underserved areas. And since this is in Tableau, if you would have had this dashboard in front of you, you can zoom in at a very, very fine grain. Again, you can zoom in to almost the size of a city block. The level is at that level of detail. So this is actually a very rewarding analysis for us to do because the C-suite, when Reggie and his team showed this to them, were kind of stunned at the capability that they really didn't have before. So those are two really good examples of how this new stack has added pretty much direct business value to SDFCU. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it off to our good partners and friends over at Alteryx. So take it away, guys.
Reggie and Phil, thank you so much for that fantastic presentation. It definitely highlighted how the stack of AWS, Alteryx, and Tableau can bring value to any organization. And before we go ahead and jump to our demo of that very stack, I'd actually like to go over what makes Alteryx a leading enterprise analytics platform. Through the end-to-end platform, Alteryx provides users with the ability to discover, blend, prep, analyze, deploy, and manage the analytics within an organization. As we just heard, Alteryx enables organizations to perform advanced blending across multiple large and varied sources of data, whether they reside in the cloud or on premises. Similarly, with Alteryx, you can output your insights in any format, including Tableau, as you just saw. It's important to note that Alteryx also provides many features beyond data prep and blend, including the ability to perform analytics, spatial analysis, and advanced predictive modeling in an environment that is both code-free as well as code-friendly. And that's all through just one of our offerings, which is Alteryx Designer. When you add in Alteryx Server and Connect, you gain the ability to discover data and analytic assets across your organization, develop analytic processes, and share that analysis with others at scale. What's more, our latest product offering, Alteryx Promote, rounds out the platform by providing an end-to-end data science system for developing, deploying, and managing predictive models and real-time decision APIs. Adding to the value of the Alteryx platform is our community, which is there every step of the way for our users in order to provide guidance, helpful support, and support more or less in helping foster and further the culture of analytics at the organization. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Michael for the demo of AWS, Tableau, and Alteryx in action together. Michael?
Okay, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. So before we get started, I just want to go over the fact that Alteryx has a suite of products, right? So we have the Alteryx Designer, we have Alteryx Server, Alteryx Connect, and Alteryx Promote. So Alteryx Connect is going to be our data and asset discovery solution, right? That also encompasses data cataloging. Alteryx Promote is going to help with real-time modeling, and it's going to bridge the gap between models being built in one language and transferred to another. And then that leads us to Alteryx Designer and Alteryx Server. So Alteryx Designer is what you should be able to see up on my screen here. Alteryx Designer is going to be our desktop software. It's a drag and drop user interface. So it's going to sit on your PC behind your computer's firewall. If you want to go ahead and pull in your data coming in from one of your disparate sources, what you're going to do is drag and drop this input data tool that you see here onto our canvas area. With that, you'd navigate to the left where it says connect to a file or a database and go ahead and select this dropdown. And what you'll notice here is that we can connect to SQL Server, Oracle, Hadoop, essentially anything that's ODBC or OLEDB driven, we can connect to. So if you wanted to go ahead and establish that Redshift connection, that would be through this ODBC drive here. Further, you could also bring in your data in the form of a flat file. So if I navigate to this files pane here, you'll see a list of all of the different file types that we support. So you can go ahead and read in your data that resides in a TXT, CSV file, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Access, JSON, Esri, XML, things like that. Now, if we wanted to go ahead and read in our data coming out of S3, for instance, what we would go ahead and do is navigate to this connectors pane to the far right here. And within that connectors pane, it's going to give us a list of the various applications that we can connect to via an API. So you'll see here that we can connect to Amazon S3. You can also pull in your data that resides in other applications such as Adobe and Google Analytics, Marketo, Salesforce, and a few other applications there. So if I wanted to go ahead and read in my data from S3, what we would do is drag and drop this S3 download tool onto our canvas area here, and then we would input our credentials to the left here accordingly. So let me go ahead and grab my access key. We'll pull in that secret key. And then what we would do is connect to the bucket that we want to go ahead and pull in our data from. So I'd click on these three little dots here, go to Data Science Central, select OK, and then we would point to that object that we want to go ahead and read in. So I have an order details CSV file there, and then I would just select my file format for CSV, and then go ahead and hit this play button at the top of the screen. So Alteryx is a runtime environment, meaning every time that you go ahead and hit this green play button at the top of the screen, it's going to reach out to the data source, extract that data, and load it into the computer's working memory for processing. So all of the processing is going to take place in memory. With that in mind, there's not going to be any record limitation in terms of how much data we're able to read in. The only limitation would fall on the user's end in terms of how much RAM is available on their PC. Once you go ahead and read in that data, that's when you leverage the tools at the top here in your tool palette in order to start to do some manipulation on your data. So under your favorites category, more of our commonly utilized tools, things like your input and output data. In the same way that we read in this data, you can output it. So you can output your data back into the cloud, into a database, into a visualization software like Tableau, Qlik, or Power BI, or back into a flat file like Excel. You'll also notice under this favorites pane here that we have some tools for data cleansing. If data integrity is an issue for you, if you need to go ahead and filter your data, we have this filter tool here. You can create calculated fields, right? Run formulas leveraging this formula tool that you see here. And of course, you're able to join your data leveraging this join tool. What you'll notice is that all of these tools are broken out and color-coded based on functionality. So in this in and out category, again, you'll see that input and output data tool. Under our prep tab here, you'll see some tools for data cleansing, data preparation, essentially preparing your data, shaping it, and manipulating it. Under the join category here, this is where you will also find that join tool in order to join up those data sets coming in from disparate sources. And you might also notice that we support fuzzy matching as well. We're able to parse out our data, do things like text to columns, and we also support regular expressions. And then you can even transform your data as well, running crosstabs and transposes on your data. And then we also have a summarize tool, which sort of acts as a pivot table in which you can do your grouping, aggregation, summing, counting, things like that. So what you might notice is that you start to move further along in the tool palette here. The tools start to get a little bit more advanced, a little bit more sophisticated. So we jump into our geospatial analytics. So within geospatial analytics, you can do things like calculating drive times between two centroids. So you can calculate the drive time between a customer point and a store. You can also create trade areas around centroids, do heat maps, right, things like that. And then you also notice that we have a suite of predictive tools down to the far right here. And we have 6 different categories for our predictive tools. And that starts with data investigation and then goes all the way to prescriptive here. So you can run things like association analysis, Pearson correlations. Under this predictive pane here, you can do linear and logistic regressions, decision trees, forest models. You can do some A/B testing, time series forecasting, predictive grouping, things like market basket analysis, and then we also have some prescriptive simulation as well. So what I'd like to go ahead and do is walk you guys through a brief workflow here, pull in some data from S3, do some basic cleansing, manipulation, shaping of that data, joining it together, and then running some predictive analyses on it. So again, the first step in this workflow was to bring in that data from S3. Right? And then what we did next was brought in a browse tool. What the browse tool allows us to do is take a deeper dive, deeper analysis into our data set. So immediately to the left here, we're presented with this nice visualytics chart to the left here, as well as a broken down data profile. So we're seeing values in our data like the uniques, nulls, min, max, average, standard deviation. And then you might notice down in the bottom in the results pane here, we have built-in functionality for data integrity, and that's those green bars at the top of each column here saying OK 100%. Essentially, Alteryx is reading each column and detecting the integrity of the data within each respective column. You might notice that over this discount column here, there's a little bit of red in that little header there, and that's telling me that almost 9% of my values are null. and we can see that in our data set below. So now when I click into this discount column, you might notice that our visual analytics chart changes to the left here, right? And then we see that we have a total of 704 null values. So maybe we want to go ahead and clean up those null values. But before we do so, I want to go ahead and check the metadata. So if I select the metadata here, immediately we're presenting with the column names, the type, and the size of that data. If I want to go ahead and automatically adjust that metadata that I see there, I could leverage an auto field tool here. Again, hit that green play button. And then what we're going to see out of the output of that auto field tool is that Alteryx has automatically detected, that type of data, right, and changed it accordingly. So we've changed the data type and limited the size as well. What we can go ahead and do next now is go ahead and update those null values. So there's a couple different ways that we could go ahead and do that within Alteryx. One of which is going to be the data cleansing tool. So I could filter out those nulls. I could create a formula to perhaps get rid of those null values. But I'm going to use this data cleansing tool that you see here. So just drag and drop. With the data cleansing tool, you select the fields that you'd like to clean up. So I want to go ahead and clean up this discount column. We're going to choose to replace those nulls with a 0. And then you could also remove any unwanted characters, so some unnecessary leading and trailing white space, letters, numbers, punctuation. You just make those selections accordingly here. Go ahead and hit that play button. And then once more, out of the output of this tool, you're going to see those changes take effect. So now you can see that this discount column is 100% clean, and all of those null values have been replaced by a 0. Go ahead and take this one step further and perhaps perform some calculated fields, do some calculations within Alteryx. What we can do is leverage this formula tool that you see here. So drag and drop that formula tool. And what the formula tool is going to allow us to do is either update existing columns or create a new column. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new column, name it total sales, and then just build out a simple expression. So I'll start to type in unit price, multiplied by quantity, multiplied by my discount. With that, it's going to give us a preview of what our data looks like in the pane above here. And in this case, because it is a numeric value, I'm going to go ahead and update this data type from a VW string to a double. With that, out of the output of this tool, what we're going to see is that we now have this new column for total sales. And what we could go ahead and do next perhaps is perform some aggregation, do some grouping. Right now that we've went ahead and pulled in our data from S3, performed some data cleansing, done some calculated fields, let's go ahead and group that data a little bit. So what I'm going to leverage is the summarize tool that you can see here. So drag and drop that summarize tool, and we can go ahead and configure that accordingly now. So what we're going to do is group by customer ID. We can do account distinct of our order IDs here, rename that column to transactions. I'll go ahead and sum up our total sales. And then let's bring in our store number as well. Now I really like to show this summarize tool because it does a really great job of visually representing how your data is transformed throughout each step of this process. And what I mean by that is that when you go ahead and select this input anchor here, you can see what your data looked like coming into the tool. And when you go ahead and configure it to the left and select the output anchor, you can visually see that transformation take place, and that goes for any step along this process. So you can always go back and trace your data and see those transformations take place. So when we say that Alteryx is not a black box, that's what we mean in that you can always trace back your data and see those steps. Now, the final step in this process, now that we brought in our data from S3, cleaned it up, did some calculations, and summarized it, would be to join this data with another incoming data set. So if I go ahead and drag and drop this input data tool, I can go ahead. This time I'll connect to some customer data. And let's say that lives in a flat file like Excel here. So I'll double click on my customer data there, go ahead and select OK. And then we can leverage that join tool that we had alluded to earlier in order to join up our data. So what we're going to do is connect each data set like so, where this would represent my left-hand data set. This will be your right-hand data set. And then what you do is select the unique identifier in order to join the two on. So in each instance, there's going to be a customer ID. And then we can go ahead once more and run that workflow. The nice thing about this join is that it's going to produce 3 outputs, an L, a J, and an R, where the R and the L would represent our right and left unjoined data respectively. And then the J is going to be our inner join. You could also do some sorts of outer joins by leveraging this union tool. Connecting the R and the J would represent a right outer join. Connecting the L, the J, and the R would represent a full outer join. So now that we have this data in a nice clean format, perhaps we're ready to go ahead and run some predictive analyses on it. So what we can go ahead and do, given this data is working with order information and customer information, perhaps we want to go ahead and predict the likelihood that a customer will respond to an email marketing campaign. So that's going to be a binary yes-no variable response. So what we can leverage is a logistic regression tool here. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag and drop this logistic regression tool. I'm going to add all the browsers to the outputs here, and we'll just configure the tool accordingly. So we'll select the target variable, which is going to be a responder, and then those fields that are likely to have an impact on whether or not a customer will respond. So we'll say the total number of transactions and total number of sales. Let's go ahead and give that a minute to run. As that's running, I just wanted to call out that all of these tools, all of these predictive tools that you can see here are all built off of open source R coding. So in the bottom left of each one of these tools, there's a little R, right, and that indicates that there's open source R going on in the background. Now, the output of this logistic regression tool would be 3 outputs here, an O, an R, and an I, where the O would represent your model object. The R would give us a snapshot of our results pane here, where you can go ahead and look to the left. And it's going to give us a breakdown of our data here, right? We're going to see the p-values, the z-values. You have your significance codes here. So as someone who might not necessarily have that data science background, I can still go in here, look at the significance codes, and I'm easily able to tell that total sales is far more likely to have an impact on whether or not that customer will respond to my marketing campaign than number of transactions. We also have this I output. This is going to be our interactive viz, right? And this is going to have some data like the accuracy, recall, optimal probability cutoff. If I go ahead and pop open this new window here, you can see some of our charting would be in there as well, right? So you have some conditional density plots, and then you have your performance ROC precision versus recall charts. What I'd like to do is call out this optimal probability cutoff of 0.117, because what we can go ahead and do now is go ahead and bring in a filter tool, and I will filter on only those responders equal to no. So we'll say that responder field equals no. And then what we could do next is go ahead and score that data. So I'll drag and drop a score tool onto the canvas area and then connect it like so, where we're going to connect that score tool to our initial data and then also to that logistic tool. And let's give that a moment to run here. Now, with the score tool, that's going to produce 2 outputs, a score yes and a score no, where score yes is going to indicate yes, the likelihood that that customer will respond to my email marketing campaign. And then score no is going to be the opposite. No, that customer is not likely to respond to my email marketing campaign. Now, what we could finally do next is leverage that optimal probability cutoff that we had pointed out to earlier, which was 0.117. And we can filter down on only those records where the score yes was greater than or equal to 0.117, because I know that those are the clientele that are most likely to respond to my email marketing campaign. So let me go ahead and add a filter tool next. And then finally, what we can do is bring in an output tool. And then we can go ahead and push this data out to perhaps a Tableau data extract. And then what we're going to be able to do is see that data populated directly into Tableau. So as this is running, a couple things to point out as well. just for ease of use, we have this global search functionality in the top right corner here. So any questions that you might have on the platform, you can go ahead and type those in there, right? I type in Tableau. It gives me all the tools associated to Tableau, as well as help articles, and then access to the Alteryx community as well, right? But now that we went ahead and let this workflow run, what we could do is go ahead into our results pane below that has this TDE hyperlink. I go ahead and select that TDE, pop that open. And then on my other screen here, Tableau is populating, and that's going to give us a snapshot of our data after this filter tool here. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and we can go ahead and push it to the next slide.
Awesome. Michael, thank you again for an informative demo. You always deliver. As a next step, I'd like to ask our viewers today to visit us at alteryx.com/Tableau Kit to download your 14-day free trial of the Alteryx Designer. With the kit, you'll get pre-built Alteryx workflows that make it that much easier to get hands-on experience with Alteryx, and you'll also get corresponding Tableau visualization so you can really see how the two platforms work together. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Bill for Q&A.
Well, Reggie, Bill, Michael, Rahman, thanks so much for that excellent presentation. So we'll get started today with today's Q&A session. I want to thank the audience for their participation. We've had a lot of questions that have come in. So we'll do our best to get through all of them in the time remaining. And during this Q&A session, I'll leave up this screen with contact information if you'd like to contact any of our speakers today following today's webinar. So let's get started. Reggie, when you first arrived on scene, the audience is interested to know more about the assessment that you did, but particularly, obviously, you were trying to convince people to change their behaviors. What did you do, or what do you suggest in terms of getting both IT and the line of business folks to accept the stack and practices that you implemented?
I think one of the key things that we did, and I thought would bring a lot of value, was to just really partner with the business. I didn't want to be seen as I was dictating that we have to use this type of technology. It was more so really taking that step back, documenting the current state processes, taking a look at those pain points, and then from there, that drove the decision-making and the tools that we've chosen for our platform. So I would say we got a couple of quick wins early on where we automated processes. We really cleaned up data. And Michael did a great job going through the demo, showing some of the capabilities of Alteryx, and we definitely used some of those same out-of-the-box functionality within the tool. And it really helped us to go back to the business and go back to the functional owners of systems and stop bringing in bad data at its source, right? I think that's one thing that really brought a lot of value, and we saw that the quality of reports that were built went way up as far as the data quality. And quite frankly, a lot of the business leads that I partnered with, they would go back to our leadership, to our C-suite, and just tell them the work that we're doing. Like when they have their own updates in their weekly, status meetings, leadership meetings, they would bring my name up and talk about some of the initiatives that we were working on. And so when I would go back and I would have my leadership meetings, or when I would meet with the C-suite, they would always bring that up. So that just built up a lot of goodwill, and I was actually taking real world examples and showing how technology can enable us to move forward and to reduce that friction, really.
Well, thank you. That's excellent. Excellent description. Now, the audience has also asked a number of questions about, okay, now that you've got everybody to agree, how long did it actually take to make it happen? So this is a little bit about onboarding. So tell us in general how long it took to get folks up and comfortable using the new technologies, and then I'll ask you some additional questions about that.
Sure. I'd say it's definitely an ongoing. I want to say that it's ongoing, right? As we have new team members join the credit union. But I would say within the first few months, we got quick wins out of the door in like the first month, to be quite honest. As far as our team members getting more comfortable with the tool, it just came with time. I mean, I think Phil remembers this. One of the analysts that is on my team, he came to Phil with a new use case of using Alteryx, and it saved us so much time. It saved that business team a lot of headaches, and they were just so happy. So once people got the confidence and they saw that this is transformational, right? This is not just taking us from point A to B. This really pushed us down the continuum of having a real modern, scalable tech stack. And so once they got that confidence, people stop by all the time. They want, I had to procure more licenses of Alteryx and Tableau. They want to get their hands dirty. So I say it's ongoing, but I see incremental benefits, and I see our team members getting value out of the tool each and every week, really.
Terrific. Tell us a little bit more about training, ongoing training, and how many different user groups or types do you have? For example, there's your analyst group, and then I presume there's a line of business group? Are there more than just the two groups of users that you have to deal with separately?
I would say we've definitely bridged those silos. But if you were to describe it, yes, I would say you have the technical analytical team, IT, the team that I manage on enterprise data management, and then obviously each line of business, they have their analysts, they have their management, and so it's sort of broken up like that. But we're pretty lean shop, if you will. So my team takes in all of the new requests, and we sit every week. We definitely have a standing meeting where we go through some of the requests and we determine how can we leverage the platform. Is there something that we need to bring in more data to enrich our current data sets, our current data warehouse, data marts, or is this something that we can answer with what we already have in place? So it's certainly just an ongoing thing, but I just describe it as that. It's sort of, if you will, it's been centralized, if you will, instead of decentralized, but everyone comes to myself and the team.
Well, thanks for that explanation.
Also talking about training a little bit, one of the cool things that we did, especially early in the project, is host office hours. So basically that was a time when, Reggie's, colleagues could come to the conference room that we sat in and that the data team sat in to either ask questions about the tool, or make requests of analytic components that they were interested in. So that's something from a training aspect that worked for us.
Well thank you.
That's a great. I'm sorry to interrupt, Bill, but that's a great point. Yeah, that was really, really key. I thought that would be something that would make us more accessible. We obviously we have our marching orders. We're trying to build out the platform and get everything built for each kind of going in an agile format, right? We will take in requirements and we'll have those sprints that were 6 to 8 weeks. But those open office hours are real critical into the success of the platform.
Well, Reggie, Phil, Michael, Raman, thank you for some great answers to some very good questions. And for those of you that asked questions today that weren't answered, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to the Alteryx team and your speakers so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. Now, I have just a few quick announcements. If you'd please mark your calendars for May 23rd, that's tomorrow, which is our next Data Science Central webinar, which will be an expert's guide to Apache Spark to be presented by Databricks. Also remember that today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today, and you can find that on the home page of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. Well, this brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions. A special thanks again to Alteryx for their sponsorship, and particularly our speakers today, Reggie Wilkerson, Phil Hetzel, Michael Sullivan, and Raman Kaler, for their insights into today's topic. So this is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow, May 23rd. Have a great day.